This week on the Inside Athletic Training Podcast, we welcome in Jeff Wood, the Associate Director of Sports Medicine for the University of Tennessee baseball team. Enjoy the show. All right, Jeff, super happy to have you on the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. We look forward to talking about your awesome career in athletic training and your time at the University of Tennessee. But first, for the listeners out there who might not know much about you or your work, let's share a few things about your background. So take us back to the beginning. Where are you from? What kind of sports were you into growing up? And how did you find your passion for athletic training?
Well, I grew up in a little place called Scott Depot, West Virginia. I was born in like 1960, and grew up there. Went to Winfield High School, and the reason I got into athletic training was my neighbor. We had the Charleston Charlies was the AAA team for the Pittsburgh Pirates way back in the 70s, and my neighbor, she was a huge baseball fan. And so she would take me to games. I was a baseball fan. I grew up loving the Cincinnati Reds back when it was the Big Red Machine.
Yeah.
That was our team. And she would take me to the games every night. And one night I'm at the game, and I saw, pitcher gets hurt or something, the guy runs out of the dugout onto the field. And it happened to be Bill Norris, who's in the Hall of Fame with the Tennis Hall of Fame now. And he was the athletic trainer there. And I asked her, I said, what does that guy, what's he doing? She goes, oh, he's the athletic trainer. He takes care of all the injuries. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's what I'm going to do in life right there. I knew right then that was going to be it, because I love baseball, but I had no talent. And it was a way to be involved with the game. I love medicine. Mm-hmm. And at that time I was probably in ninth grade.
Wow.
And it just so happened that the next year the basketball coach at the high school had been my grade school teacher, and he comes to there, and he asked me one day, he goes, hey, Jeff, would you like to tape ankles? I'm like, well, I never thought of it, but what's tape ankles? He goes, well, you tape the ankles and, take care of people get hurt. I go, exactly. I said, so that's it. So that started in about 1974 or 75. And I just started basketball manager, student trainer.
Yeah.
Did all the stuff, went to the Kramer student trainer camps and
sure.
all those kind of things. And that's how it started.
That's awesome. Very unique, I would say, for you to know, before even high school, what you want to do. So really cool that it's kind of been a passion of yours for so long. Well, Jeff, after that, obviously college is the next step. I want to talk a bit about your education here today. You spent some time at Marshall learning the ways of the athletic training world. Looking back and reflecting on what you learned in school compared to what you do every day now as a longtime professional, what are those key takeaways and things that you might encourage other students now to kind of pay more attention to as they're in school?
Well, Marshall gave me a great foundation. And, that was, I graduated from there in 1984. So athletic training has changed a lot. But it just taught me I had good mentors. We had an internship program back then. And then, then they developed a curriculum while I was there. And so I transitioned into that. And I just had guys people above me who just taught me to learn every day.
Yeah.
I think that if that's the key to anything in athletic training, I don't remember I do remember all that stuff, most of it, because I still do some of the same stuff I did even back then. But it just taught me to learn every single day, to learn something new. And even now, I've been counting back to high school. I've been involved in athletic training for 50 years, and I still learn something every day. It's amazing to me.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And learning it goes outside of the textbook, as I think a lot of athletic trainers will say there's the anatomy, there's your foundation, but there's a lot of stuff to learn about how sports work, how the athletic training room works, how to work with athletes, build those relationships. When you were coming up in the early days of your career, or even in college for that matter, we talked offline here about a couple people, Jamie Reed, Richie Bancells, who you spent some time with. Did you have any key role models when you broke in as a professional who kind of showed you the ways, the ins and outs, the uniqueness of the working in an athletic training room?
Well, as far as baseball was concerned, Jamie, and he was instrumental because I followed him and worked with him in, you know, in spring training and those things. And you met trainers, all through the league, and you just picked up things here and there. But Jamie was a big deal, and because it was funny because everybody always said the next year when I came in after Jamie left, they'd be like, "Well, JMO didn't do it this way," and I'm like, "Well, I'm not Jamie, unfortunately, but."
Yeah, not many people are.
Yeah, not many people are. So, but I'm me, and it's worked out okay over the years.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, you mentioned you've been in the game for, in athletic training for near 50 years now. I'm sure your philosophy when you got into the game was one way and things have changed. You've probably learned so much, data, technology. It's a brand new world out there for sports medicine professionals. Has your philosophy of taking care of athletes changed much over the years, or do you kind of stay true to what you learned, back in the early days of your career?
I've had a lot of influences over the my years. I'm really into Chinese medicine,
Okay.
Ayurvedic medicine. Uh, I've been blessed to know some chiropractors here, work at our university, so that's an influence.
Hmm.
And just read and learn a lot about those kind of things. I think my philosophy's kind of stayed the same, but in some ways it's way different because I no longer do ice. I
Yeah.
haven't done ice for 20 years,
Hmm.
and people still do it. That's fine, but it works great for me the way I do it.
Yep.
So I don't use ice. Uh, I still use the same stem I used back in college, and my whole philosophy now is just to make sure the body's aligned correctly. I've been doing postural restoration from Ron Rusk, postural restoration from Ron Rusk out in Lincoln, Nebraska, for uh, over 25 years now. I do PRI, and
Hmm.
that is really uh, my foundation
Hmm.
to take care of baseball injuries, uh, do the postural restoration, do some joint manipulation things. Standard, you really just want to move fluid, get the swelling out.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't use a lot of medication. I don't really believe in a lot of anti-inflammatories the
Hmm.
first few days. Um, do some homeopathic things, homeopathic remedies. So, I, yeah, I'm way different than I was, but my philosophy's always been the same.
Yeah.
And basically,
And Jeff, have you noticed on that line of care? Have you noticed, working at the University of Tennessee, which will get into your career for a couple decades now? Have you noticed a difference in how the athletes under your care take care of their bodies, the information they know compared to what guys knew 20 years ago? Has that changed kind of the baseline and starting point for the athletes' bodies you're working on?
yeah, I mean, the athletes today are in much better condition. I
Hmm.
mean, Sam, when I first started in professional baseball in 1983, we didn't even have strength and conditioning coaches.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing. And, nutrition was not a thing. After a road game, you'd stop at the 7-Eleven, and buy a hot dog or something and, to take home. And, so that's totally changed. And their education level is so much better. Now,
Hmm.
the kids nowadays don't know the game as well, because of all the nature of baseball now is showcases and all
Yeah.
these kind of things. And they're into technology. They want to know spin rates and velocity and all these
Hmm.
kind of things. Um, I'm not really there, but that's taken them to another level as
Yeah.
far as athletes. They come in much better shape. Athletes are so much bigger now in baseball,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that's a lot of difference. But I've always been blessed to have good pitching coaches who were old school,
Hmm.
believed in the basics, great strength and conditioning coaches. Now here, we have nutritionists and all that. So the other thing that's changed the game too is the internet. Uh, Everybody
Yes.
can Google, and they all come in all ready to go with what they've got going on, and so that's a challenge. Parents as
Yeah.
well.
Sure. Yeah, and I want to talk a bit more about that. Do you find, I wouldn't say less trust in the athletic trainers or people in your position who do what you do, but you find you get more opinions from players and stakeholders in their careers because there is so much more information out there? And is it kind of a battle to kind of have that authority in the training room, or are players pretty much trusting in what you guys are doing still?
Well, I think because of my experience level and the amount of time I've been here and 35 years in baseball or whatever, I think they trust me,
Hmm.
but but they're still, they still question things, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll explain to them. They ask, well, why don't you ice or why don't you do anti-inflammatories? And I'll be happy to explain my philosophy to them, and it all works out. The kids trust me. They come to me. It's still
Hmm.
hard to get away from mom and dad,
Of course.
because with illnesses nowadays, well, mom says I need this, and all these different kind of things, and I should do this, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge. It sure is. But the parents want, what's best for their son,
Sure.
you know. And plus, let's be honest, Sam. I mean, they've got an investment in them,
Of course. Yeah.
and I'm not saying that as a callous thing or a bad thing, but they've invested a lot of time and money into that young man, and they want to
Hmm.
make sure he's taken good care of.
Yeah.
And but we do that. We do that here. I have great, people behind me, great team physician,
Hmm.
who's here right in our training room every day, and so yeah, we do a good job for them.
Yeah. And Jeff, I want to jump into kind of your road to Tennessee, where you're at now, which we'll get into. You're an athletic trainer who's lucky enough to have had experience in the professional ranks, but also in the college setting, a ton of success in both areas, which is really, really interesting. You did spend about 10 years or so with the Baltimore Orioles organization where you got your start. Talk about that experience in pro baseball, differences between minor league ball and the college programs you've worked in, and just share your overall experience and what you liked and disliked about professional baseball.
Well, professional baseball, I mean, my whole dream, like I said earlier, my whole dream was to be a professional baseball athletic trainer. And I mean, that was it from ninth grade until it changed. Uh, that was the thing. And I was so fortunate to come into the game when I did. My life, it sounds crazy, but I haven't planned any of my life. It's just happened. You just had to be at the right place at the right time and be open to things.
Hmm.
Uh, but when I got into professional baseball, we were in Bluefield, West Virginia. I grew up in West Virginia. It says a couple hours from my house.
Yeah.
And the first time I went to the stadium, the training room was kind of just an old dingy little room back in the corner of the stadium. That was a long time ago, and there was this big hole in the wall that was facing the doorway out to the parking lot. And I asked the guy, I said, "Well, what is that? What's that hole for?" He goes, "Oh, you'll find out." And so the first big rain we had, the water would shoot out of that hole into the parking lot, and you had to step over it, and that was professional baseball back in those days, right? And I was the clubhouse guy and had to do the
Hmm.
laundry and
Yeah.
the buses and everything. And so I did that, and was fortunate enough to get moved up to Double A. And the first year I was at Double A, I was in spring training, and the stadium burned down, burned my car up in it.
Wow.
That was still a thing. I I came into the training room the next morning, and Jamie said, "Hey, Woody," he said, "the ballpark burned down in Charlotte." And I go, "No way!" And so I called the number, and it was a busy signal. He goes, "Yeah, because the phone is burned off the hook." And so
Wow.
that was my introduction to Double A, and spent 4 years there in a makeshift stadium, but had a great time. Saw some
Hmm.
great players, and then went 4 years to Triple A. And when I was in Double A, I met my wife. She worked for the team here in Knoxville, Tennessee, the
Okay.
Double A team there, and her and my manager had a little riff going, and so I said, "Well, Skip, I'm going to have to take care of this girl and make it up to her because you're so mean to her." And he goes, "Well, you take care of her any way you want to. I don't care." So for the past 37 years, I've still been taking care of that little
Wow.
problem he had. So we got married and moved to they got promoted to Rochester and started having kids, had two boys in Rochester, New York. And it just felt like the time was right to leave. Jamie was in the big leagues with Richie, and it was going to be a few more years before I get to the big leagues. And we were way away from our families. And so back in those days, and probably nobody will remember this, but you used to have to call the NATA hotline to get the job postings. And one night I was in the stadium. It was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and I dial it up, because I'm thinking, man, I got to have a change. And I heard one for Clinton, Tennessee, which is my wife's hometown.
Hmm.
They were running a trainer in a physical therapy clinic, and I couldn't believe it. I listened to that job posting for like 2 weeks straight, and I finally got up enough nerve to ask my wife if she wanted to move back home, and she's like, "No, not really."
Yeah.
But we did. I worked in the clinic, and then after about 7 years in the clinic, it was just all becoming money stuff. The clinic was trying to
Hmm.
make money, and they were good. The people who owned the clinic were awesome, and they were
Yep.
great business people. Uh, but then again, you felt it was time to move on, and that was in 2000. And it just so happened, Sam, it's just crazy. We had the convention in 2000 in Nashville, and of course we had an alumni party. Marshall had an
Hmm.
alumni party, and I wasn't going to go. And I spent like 2 hours him and hawing about this if I was going to go or not. And I finally went, and one of my classmates was actually the head basketball trainer of South Carolina.
Okay.
And I was telling him how miserable I was and everything. And she said, well, his wife said, well, why don't you talk to Chad Newman at Tennessee, the basketball trainer, and see if they got a job for him. And I'm like, nah, they don't have anything for me. I didn't go to school there. I don't have a master's degree. And sure enough, the next day he comes running to me and he says, hey, look, they're looking for a baseball trainer right now at Tennessee. Their
Wow.
guy just left and they want to talk to you right now. And so I met with them, and I can still remember us sitting in what would become my office. And the head trainer at that time, Mike Rolo, said, Woody, he goes, I think you're going to have a long career at this university.
Hmm.
And that's how it started. I had to go to grad school for a couple of years, and they hired me full time. And that's how I ended up at Tennessee.
Wow. And you mentioned, Jeff, obviously a wild ride and nothing's ever planned. You never foresee things like this happening. um, you talked about wanting to be in professional baseball since you were a young kid, basically, as an athletic trainer. How difficult was it for you? I know you said you needed a change, but how difficult was it for you to kind of punt on that dream and that goal and move into the college setting versus pursuing other avenues professionally in professional baseball?
It was not hard. I made the decision with my family, my wife and my kids were too young at that time to know what was going on. But it just, Sam, it was just the right time. The game was changing. Um, I thought anyway, and it just was the right time. And again, something in my head said it's time to go. And this was an opportunity to go back to a small town. I grew up in a small town. My wife moved, it was a small town. It just was the right thing to do. And but when I did it, I made a clean break. It was like I didn't watch baseball. I didn't look at,
Yeah.
watch a professional baseball game. It was just like that was another chapter of my life. It was over and done, and we'll just move on. And if it was the clinic forever, that's what it was going to be. Um,
Hmm.
and that was fine. It was just the right thing to do.
Yeah. And now, Jeff, you've been at the University of Tennessee. I believe this is going to be your 24th year with the program. An amazing accomplishment to just be at a certain place for so long and be ingrained in the culture of the baseball program. We'll get into more details about working there and what you guys do every day. But we can't start talking about the University of Tennessee without talking about last year, 2024. An amazing year for Tennessee baseball. First ever national championship captured in Omaha last summer. Kudos to everybody there who made that happen. Amazing to watch. Talk about that experience. I mean, 24, 23 years there, over 2 decades of experience, never winning a title, and then finally it happens. Walk
Yeah.
me through your time in Omaha, those couple weeks there, how special that was for you guys.
Well, that was like you said, that was my 24th year. This will be 25 coming up.
Hmm.
You know, Sam, I have got such a great coaching staff, and in the past 7 years with Tony Vitello and his staff that is still basically the same that ever since we've been here. Uh,
Yep.
it is just such an awesome experience. And, we were good. Every year we got better and better and better. I thought the COVID year was going to be, I thought we were going to go to the World Series that year because that was a great team.
Hmm.
And then 22, we let Notre Dame sneak up on us at home. That,
Yep.
that and that was a crusher. That was a crushing defeat. And but then in 24, it just seemed to happen. And you get to Omaha, that was our third time in 4 years, I think. And
Hmm.
so it's kind of like old hats. You go back, the same places to eat, and the same
Yeah.
places to go and everything. So it's kind of, just a normal thing. But we just kept winning. It was just so exciting. And, we came back, against Florida State and beat them when we were way down. And just that 2 weeks. But let me tell you something, it's exhausting.
Sure.
It was exhausting, and because in 2001, my first year here, we went to the World Series, and so I thought that was going to be like every year at Tennessee. And so
Yeah.
we went 2001, and it was such a different atmosphere. We were in old Rosenblatt Stadium,
Yep.
and it was not a big production. I can still remember we entered the stadium through the front gate, walking through the stands. You know, and and it was amazing. It was awesome. But now, Sam, it's such a big production.
Sure.
Just as Major League Baseball games are.
Yeah.
Uh, that everything is scripted. You know, they've got times you got to do everything. There's a time to do this. There's a time to do that. You got to be here at this point, and you can only go to this area at this time of the day. And so it's really exhausting. Uh, but the 2 weeks, I was happy for the kids, and for my staff, the coaches, because they work so hard,
Yep.
and I was basically just exhausted. That
Hmm.
was the point of it. When that final game was over, I was just like, it's finally over,
Yeah.
and because you, it's not Major League Baseball, it's not 162 games, but we won 60 games last year.
Yeah.
No other team has ever done that.
Yeah.
60 games, and they're just kids. I mean, they keep me so young in some ways, so frustrated in others
Yeah.
because they just have fun. And when when Tony first got here, I said, Coach, I can't wait to work with you. It's going to be, I want to have a lot of fun. He goes, winning is fun. And
Yeah.
that's what I always said. Winning is fun. And and we had fun. The
Yep.
past 7 years I've had fun all the time. It gets
Hmm.
frustrating, like I said, because young men, their brains aren't fully formed yet. So
Sure.
I got to listen to some crazy stuff, in our training room. But um, they just have fun doing it. And one kid said one time, he goes, because we're not very well liked now. I don't know why, but
Yep. Yep.
people don't like the winter. But uh, so it's funny to be so hated. You kind of bring it on, and they were playing some little game in the training room, and one of the guys said, Woody, he said, I can't believe that people hate us so bad, and we're sitting here playing this little kids game, and fighting and arguing, and so but it was an amazing time.
Hmm.
And I hope to, people ask me why, I came back for another year because they said, why didn't you just retire, And I'm like, well, I'm really a glutton. I want to win another one, to be honest with
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Yeah,
You
like you
know?
said, winning is fun. And well, I want to ask you a bit about Tony Vitello, who's leading. He's the head coach there, leading the program. Um, Obviously had an amazing run. For people on the outside, he seems very intense and just such a passion to win. Talk about that relationship between athletic trainer and head coach and kind of you and Tony and how you guys operate so well together. I know there's so much information that has to go back and forth from you guys, the sports medicine team, to Tony and his staff. Talk about how you guys work together and what that's been like, for a couple years now.
Well, like I said, Tony and Frank Anderson, the pitching coach, they're just amazing to work with. And Tony is intense, but it's funny because he's intense between the white lines, but off the field, he's still intense and passionate, but he doesn't display that. I hope nobody, gets the wrong idea, but he doesn't display that off the field, especially in
Hmm.
our conversations. I give him the information. If things happen, I give him the information. And Sam, him and his staff, they're more conservative than I am.
Okay.
Uh, when it comes to getting players back on the field, they would much rather keep a guy out, than they would risk further injury putting him in because
Yeah.
they see the big picture.
Hmm.
If we're in, we start open our season next week, and if a guy cannot play then, that's not a big deal to that coaching staff. They're looking at March and when we go into SEC play and looking into June, at the World Series. So they get the big picture. And so that's good for an athletic trainer. Um, so they take the information. We just, tell them what the plan is and we go with it,
Hmm.
and sure they get frustrated, but as well they should. I get frustrated.
Yeah.
Guys get hurt. I get pretty upset, and because you want them to be able to play. But he's never questioned me, or he asks questions, but he's
Hmm.
never questioned our judgment or mine or my team physician. Um, they just never do that. So it's been really. It's just an awesome experience for me anyway. And they accepted me. They didn't have to. I was the old
Yeah.
guy that been there and I've been through a lot of losing seasons, um, as well. But they accepted me and took me in as part of that group. I don't think I'm in the inner circle of the staff,
Hmm.
but they take my opinion and do with it what they want to, and we go from there.
Sure. Yeah, obviously a great working relationship, and like you said, it shows in the winning, which is awesome to see. Well, Jeff, Tennessee ranks inside the top five again this year, preseason polling. Do you feel different going into this year as the defending champion? Do you feel pressure as an athletic training staff and a program to repeat and defend that title, or are you guys kind of just business as usual as the season approaches?
Well, for me, it's business as usual. Uh, and I think it is for the staff as well. We've established a level to the program, uh, but they don't make a big deal out of the national championship because we want to do it again as a group, and the players understand that, and the staff sees that. We didn't even we're building a whole new ballpark and everything right now. It's construction city,
Yep.
but but we're constructing a new team. We lost a lot of guys. You got to bring in new guys. You got to bring in new freshmen, and it's a constant work, ethic. And being here is not easy. Well, I tell all these kids, being at this university is not easy. They demand a lot. And we just go about our business. We haven't even put up a national championship logo or anything, even in the stadium. And
Wow.
the guy told me the other day that Tony didn't even want to put one in there. That he just wanted to go on again, and do the same thing. And they made him put one. He's putting one up somewhere in the stadium. But
Yeah.
for him, it's continuing that high level of performance. And that's what we expect out of everybody. Every year I say, they tell me I'm old and grumpy, but every year I say, oh, we're not going to be very good. I didn't think last year we were very good, at this time of the
Yeah.
year. And, but we do have a lot of work to do. And, it's going to be hard for everybody.
Yeah. Fun to hear you kind of retroactively talk about you thought you weren't going to be too good and you're winning 60 games in the national championship. So always,
Yeah, they kind of surprised me,
yeah,
but again, I attribute that to, of course, the talent, but also the coaching staff who continues to build and develop. And, uh, I got probably the best pitching coach in the country,
hmm,
who has knowledge and understand and sees the big picture. And I don't have to worry about him overusing people
yeah,
because they see the limits of what we can do. And, and that's where we go.
yeah. And Jeff, getting in more detail about your staff there in the sports medicine department, walk us through kind of the structure of the staff, who's working with baseball, who you're overseeing, kind of the resources you guys have for the baseball team over there.
Well, for baseball, I'm the staff.
Yep.
I'm the only staff there is. We have 53 guys on our roster right now. We carry 40 during the season. I think it's 40, uh, and I'm the only staff member. So I have two students.
Hmm.
I have a team physician. Have we have a nutritionist. We have a full-time strength and conditioning coach. Uh, Again, like I said, I work closely with the chiropractor and doing some things. And then we have our team physician, Chris Klink, has assembled a whole host of specialists, right,
Hmm.
who we have at our disposal. And that's pretty much that for baseball. But as far as the overall staff, goodness gracious, I don't know how many full-time people we have now. We have four full-time people with football. That's a pretty big deal.
Yep.
Uh, and then two head trainers for basketball, soccer, swimming, rowing.
Hmm.
They all have full-time people who work
Okay.
with them. Tennis. Uh, yeah, so that's the staff. We have, six interns who work with us now, but they don't do anything with baseball. It's just all they're taking care of their own sports and helping
Yeah.
out with those kind of things.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much our staff. We have a director of sports medicine who's been here longer than I have,
Hmm.
and he started before me. So that's his job, um, and he can keep that job. That's I want no, I want no part of that job.
Yeah.
Um, so that's basically what we have.
Hmm. And we're obviously getting right into the season here. Walk us through kind of a typical week in the season. So let's say you guys are traveling or playing, or even at home for that matter, just playing a Friday, Saturday, Sunday series. What's that look like for you preparation wise? Treatments? How often do you guys have guys coming in? What's like a weekend series look like for you guys as athletic trainers?
Now we'll start at home. Of course, we play usually Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Sometimes we'll play Thursday, Friday, Saturday
Yep.
for TV. But that's the games we play. This season we play every Tuesday, so we'll play Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think there's a couple of Wednesday games in there as well to get up to our 55 games, 56 games.
Hmm.
So that's our week. Uh, they have optional lifting on Mondays. We'll do treatments during the season. We have optional lifting on Mondays. We'll do treatments. Game on Tuesday or Wednesday. Then we'll practice Wednesday, Thursday, and then Thursday we'll have kind of like a before the game practice. It's kind of what we're going to do on game day, and then we'll
Hmm.
play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I'm open every day. I started back on January 6th, and I'll be open every day until June, end of June. Uh, no weekends off, and so that's our time at home. Usually open about 5 hours before a game. On
Okay.
game day, open about 5 hours before because we have BP, and the pregame is a long drawn out thing in baseball. So I'll
Hmm.
open up about 5 hours before, do treatments. Usually treat the guys just once a day. I don't believe in bringing them in early in the morning and
Yeah.
all that stuff. Once a day is enough, and then after the game, uh, I try to get out of there as quick as possible. Unless something happens. And then when we go on the road, um, we'll leave. We'll leave on a Thursday, either fly or bus to wherever we're going. Have practice Thursday night after we get to the hotel. We'll go to the
Hmm.
stadium and practice, and then on that Friday before the game, we'll take the guys to go take batting practice at the field, at the opposing field, in their cages or whatever, and then we just play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever the games are. I do treatments in the hotel room,
Hmm.
but when you get to that point of the season, like the fall is terrible. I mean, we got 55 guys at that
Yeah.
time. We had 55 guys, and so it's just intense and demanding. But during the season, when you get down to that 40 and you got, 20 some guys playing all the time, really don't do that much on the road. It's
Yeah.
kind of a time guys relax and, do their homework. We take a lot of times take the academic counselor with us, and so they'll do
Okay.
homework and do those kind of things, and do some treatments here and there. Do pregame treatments, get guys ready to go to the stadium, and that's about it.
hmm And Jeff, we know kind of how players are evaluated throughout the year, performance-wise, succeeding, winning, a ton of different metrics there. For yourself as an athletic training professional, is there something you kind of do each year to set goals to reflect on kind of your growth and your just work over the course of the year as an athletic trainer? Is it games lost? Is it something different like that? How you measure a good year for you?
I think it's just how much time the guys lose on the field. A guy missing for an injury.
Yeah.
I can't control wins and losses.
Yep.
I finally learned that. So it's those kids that have to win the ball games. Even the coaches. Kids are on the field. That's their job. To
hmm
do what they've been trained to do, and to compete and perform, and uh, that's what they do. So they got the wins and losses. And a lot of times that's not even under their control. They just got to do the best they can.
Sure.
But for me, it's just keeping guys on the field. We always have injuries, and that's a part of the game. But just keeping those guys on the field and having them competing at the level they need to compete at, that's my metric of success.
And Jeff, you do so much for the club, for the program. There's a ton of different aspects of being an athletic trainer. You talked about the early days when you're the travel secretary and the laundry person and getting the food and all that good stuff. Reflecting on your career and your time at Tennessee, is there something you value and appreciate most about your job? Is it getting guys back on the field? Is it relationships with coaches or players, seeing them move on to the big leagues perhaps? Is there something you value and appreciate kind of most of your time at Tennessee?
I just appreciate the the people I've been able to interact with.
hmm
You know, uh, to be part of and baseball people understand, to be part of a family, you
Yep.
know, is just the most amazing thing in the world to me. You have great relationship with coaches. I still have players from 2001 who come back, give me a big hug,
Yeah.
it's come and sit in the training room and, and goof around just like they did when they were kids. Now they've got kids of their own. I got guys bringing kids to camp during the summer,
Yeah.
which is pretty stunning. But just the friendships you've made over the years and the
hmm
people you've met, even opposing teams, the athletic trainers you meet and coaches, and it's just it's just an amazing feeling to have been around, so many wonderful people. Baseball people are wonderful people,
hmm
but bar none, they're the best. And that game just it fits me. It fits my lifestyle. It fits my persona. It's just
Yep.
kind of laid back. It's intense, but it's kind of laid back. Football, you feel like you're going to war every Saturday, right? And but baseball, you lose on Friday, you got to come back and win on, play on Saturday and Sunday. You
Yeah.
still got to do it. So
Yeah.
I think the intensity level is kind of down a little bit, but just the friendships and sometimes Sam, I'll be sitting and I'll look at my hands, you know, and I'll just be sitting there looking at my hands going, think how many people you have touched,
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
years of just all the people you've looked at. And, I've had like 14 first round picks, multiple guys go to the big leagues. And just to say that you knew those people, when they were first starting out and forming, and growing up is just an amazing thing to me.
Yeah. And I think any, myself included, any former college athlete who's spent time on the training table with the athletic trainer, it's really a special bond. You spend so much time, it almost becomes like a family member, like you said, and a therapist and a psychologist all kind of wrapped in one. So it's really a cool relationship, the athlete with the athletic trainer.
What's really cool is to look back and I have several athletes who have become doctors. That
hmm
be physicians, be surgeons, uh, be physical therapists.
Yeah.
And just think that they were in my training room, and they'll even say, "Hey, I saw you did this, and it really inspired me, and I wanted to get involved in medicine and do those things." So that's a really gratifying thing that the kids do that
hmm
and think that you had something to do with that when they were sitting in your training room, having a conversation about medicine or something.
Yep. You never know how your day to day work is going to impact someone. So I think you've obviously had a huge impact on so many young men out there. Well, Jeff, this has been awesome. Really appreciate you sharing all your stories and your career, so far with us today. To wrap up the episode, we always finish with a quick Q&A segment called Extra Bases. So I'm going to ask you four quick questions and kind of let you share some personal insight about your favorite things about athletic training in the college setting. So we'll kick it off at first base here. You've worked in a lot of athletic training rooms, some really cool places throughout your professional baseball career and in college. Do you have a favorite athletic training room that you've ever worked in?
Well, I'm kind of biased. I think mine's the most favorite.
Of
Uh,
course.
it's not the fanciest. Um, we added a hot tub and cold tub this past season. Have a sauna, and that's enough for me. Coaches don't like it because it's so plain.
Yeah.
It's got white walls. It's quiet.
Uh-huh.
People know I love peace and quiet. Don't have loud music playing or TV going or anything.
Yep.
And that's my favorite place to be. And as a matter of fact, it's my favorite place to come into every day.
Yeah.
It's home. It's really home. You know.
Yep. No, that something goes a long way about a comforting place, which you obviously have there at Tennessee. Well, moving on to second base. So really excited to get your take on this answer here. You're in the dugout for so many awesome baseball games, so many cool stadiums in the SEC and across the country, and in your professional baseball career for that matter. Do you have a favorite college baseball stadium outside of Tennessee to watch a game from the dugout?
I've always really liked going to Ole Miss.
Okay. Cool.
It's just every stadium is good. Arkansas, they're so intense out there at Arkansas, but Ole Miss just always has been like the setting of it, how it sits down in among the trees and all that stuff. It's always been really my favorite place to just go and and sit at a game and get yelled at and everything.
Mm-hmm. And moving on to third base here, similar to the last question, you guys get to travel and see a lot of cool cities, a lot of cool college campuses. Do you have a favorite road trip campus to see throughout the year?
Well, again, it's not so much the town, but I like going to Oxford,
Yeah.
Ole Miss, and just seeing, the campus. I walked out around campus a few times since I've been there, and it's just really a nice place. It's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of neat,
Yeah.
and so that's probably it. I hope don't make anybody mad and they yell at me or anything. But all the places are good. I don't spend a lot of time in the town.
Okay. Yep.
Sometimes I go and I'll be sitting in, when I go to Ole Miss or something, we were staying downtown, I'd sit at the coffee shop and have a coffee out on the street or something. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the time I'm just hanging out in my room, walking somewhere to get some food or something and not really spend
Sure.
a lot of time downtown.
Yep. And moving on to home plate, last question of the day, Jeff. You've had so much experience in baseball and as an athletic trainer. Was there ever a point in time, maybe early in your career in professional baseball or one of your first couple of years at Tennessee when you had like a welcome to athletic training moment when it really hit you, maybe standing on the line for a national anthem or really a moment early in your career that stuck out to you?
I've thought about this, but I guess it would be just going out on the field, standing there for the national anthem. How
Yeah.
many national anthems have I heard in my life? You know, that's that's a crazy thing. But
Yeah.
to be anytime you're standing out there, you get introduced. If you're lucky enough to be introduced, and to be standing there looking at the crowd, wherever it's at home, on the road, Omaha. When you got, you're there and you're like, oh my gosh, this what it's become is amazing. So I guess anytime you're standing out there, but I had just been, I've just been in awe of anything involved with athletics. From the first time I worked a basketball game in high school or a football game, uh, it's just amazing to be a part of that, and that's what athletic training is, and or has been for me. And it's just been, I never worry about the money I made. I never even thought about it. My first year in AAA or double A, I made $8,500 for that year.
Wow.
$8,500. And so I, money's never meant anything to me, really, as long as I could eat and have a place to live. And but just to be out there with those athletes in that atmosphere, knowing what they go through, that is the most awesome thing in the world for me in athletic training.
Yeah, that really shows people out there how impactful the professional athletic training can be. Goes much further than just taking care of athletes and getting them back on the field. Well, Jeff, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining the show. We appreciate you sharing all your stories and expertise in the field, and wish you and the staff and everybody in Tennessee nothing but the best luck this upcoming year.
Sam, thank you so much. I've really had a blast doing it. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. For more information about PBATS and athletic training, visit pbats.com. See you next time.